discussing how you would murder somebody. I'm sure a number of you have had that experience. And murder somebody on the ship, but get away with it. So murdering somebody on a cruise ship in the Caribbean would actually be easier because it's dark at night. But in the Arctic in the summer, it's light at night and people are always out there doing, the things they do. And therefore, getting the dead body over the railing, it would be a problem. So as we were discussing it, Graham Gibson, my husband, who has a devious criminal mind, which makes him hard to live with because you never know what devious criminal thing he's up to, telling you the truth. So he said, here's how you would have to do it, and he had it all worked out in about 5 minutes. He said you couldn't kill them on the ship because there's no place to hide them, you couldn't get them over the railing, so you'd have to do it on shore. Problem with the Arctic is there aren't any trees. So things to hide behind while you are murdering them, this would be a problem. And then how to account for them not being there on the ship. So you would have to murder them early on the trip before they had made lots of friends. They would have to be traveling alone. Okay, and they would have to be somebody that the person doing the murdering knew in an earlier part of that person's life and recognizes them, but they don't recognize, in this case, her. So that kind of arrangement would have to be there. So there's a way on these ships, there's a board that you turn a tag, so you turn it to red if you're going off the ship, you turn it to green if you're coming back on. So you'd have to murder the person out of sight, come back onto the ship and turn their tag so it looks as if they're on board. Smuggle their life jacket back on board because they also count life jackets, and then make it appear as if they're still using their toothbrush, putting laundry in their laundry bag, mussing up their bed, and stuff like that, so that anybody who goes in there thinks they're still around, but just not in the cabin at that very moment. The person who gets murdered is called Bob. And there were, in fact, a number of people called Bob on the ship. I started writing this story actually on the ship and reading it out loud to my fellow passengers. Very interested in it, especially all of those named Bob. So they said, please finish it and let us know where it's published. So I did do that. The fact that there were a lot of Bobs meant that you could murder one of the Bobs and then take the invitation to the captain's table that Bob would inevitably receive and shove it under the door of a different Bob. So that nobody says, where's Bob? Where's that Bob? And the missing Bob would not be discovered missing until he got to the very end and he didn't arrive to collect his passport.
People who just say that.
What happened to Bob? Must have fallen overboard last night when he was watching the, Aurora Borealis. One frequently gets dizzy on such occasions. Just toppled over, nobody saw him. Because he was here yesterday. His shoes in his cabin were moved around.
So the thought of a crime won't occur.
Well, those are the things I had to cover off in the story. But then the question is how to do that in a story. So stone mattresses, and where does the title come from? The murder weapon is a piece of fossil, and it is a fossil of something called a stromatolite. I think you have the same word in Swedish. Stromatolita.
Stromlights, yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
I wasn't that familiar with it, I must say, but
yes,
I
well,
looked it up on the internet.
Yes,
It's the shape of it.
Yes, it's like a round cheese, because it is the life form of blue-green algae that made all of the oxygen 1.9 billion years ago. And because of frost fragmenting them, they frequently get split into quarters, and you can see that a quarter of that would make a very sharp and effective murder weapon.
And I mean, killing someone close to a thing that is 1.9 billion years ago becomes a detail in a way, not that much of a crime. Well, it's a crime, of course, but it's a history.
Oh, a detail in history.
Yeah.
Yes, granted it's a detail in history, but for those concerned, it's kind of momentous. So that's why it's called Stone Mattress.
And we might be giving away a lot now, but the best part of it is that she, possibly if this really happens then, she brings part of the stone back to the boat.
She brings it back as a geological sample and puts it on the geological sample table.
So that everyone could touch it.
Not only that, I did that myself and got permission to take it all the way home with me, so it's in my kitchen. It's in my kitchen, not to cause any fear, because your name isn't Bob. So we finished it. It's stromatolite, exactly translated, means stone mattress. So that's what it is. But in Swedish, we're not calling the full book that. The publisher felt it might be a bit puzzling. We're naming it after one of the other stories, which is the freeze-dried groom. The freeze-dried groom, because I always base these things more or less on real life. Was somebody who discovered in a storage space that they had bought at an auction, because when people don't pay for storage spaces, eventually they get auctioned off sight unseen, and then you get the key, you open them up, and sometimes you discover the Mona Lisa, and sometimes you discover a rusty old bicycle. But this person opens it up and it's a wedding. So it's the dress, it's the bouquet all dried up, it's the cake, it's the champagne, it's the champagne glasses, and it's the groom. Done up in one of those plastic zip bags that you get from the dry cleaners.